The iron bent beneath Helena's hands like warm honey, though the metal still glowed orange from the forge fire, and her father watched from across the blacksmith shop in Independence, Missouri, with pride gleaming in his weathered eyes as she shaped the horseshoe with nothing but her bare fingers and sheer will. "That is quite the gift you have there, daughter," Samuel Stone said, wiping soot from his brow. It was late summer in 1876, and the heat from the forge made the already sweltering afternoon nearly unbearable. "But you best keep it quiet. People do not understand what they fear." Helena set the horseshoe aside to cool, flexing her fingers. At 20 years old, she had been bending iron since she was 14, ever since the day a wagon wheel rim had needed emergency repair, and her father had been too ill with fever to work. Desperation had revealed her gift, and secrecy had protected it ever since. She was tall for a woman, with strong shoulders from years of working alongside her father, dark hair she kept tied back in a practical braid, and gray eyes that held both determination and kindness. "I know, Papa," she said softly, "but sometimes I wonder what the point is of having such strength if I must always hide it." "The point is staying safe," her father replied, his voice gentle but firm. "Now, we have 3 more orders to finish before sundown." The shop door swung open, and Helena instinctively stepped back into the shadows as a man entered. He had to duck his head to clear the door frame, and when he straightened, Helena found herself staring at perhaps the largest man she had ever seen. He stood well over 6 feet tall, with shoulders so broad they seemed to fill the doorway. His hair was dark brown and hung past his shoulders, tied back loosely with a leather cord. His beard was neatly trimmed, and his arms, visible beneath his rolled-up sleeves, were corded with muscle that spoke of years spent in hard labor. His eyes were a striking blue-gray, like storm clouds over the mountains, and they swept the shop with careful assessment before landing on her father. "I need a new axe head," the man said, his voice a deep rumble that seemed to vibrate through Helena's chest. "My last one shattered against an oak tree 2 days' ride from here." "Must have been some oak tree," Samuel said, moving forward to greet the customer. "Or some axe head." "Name's Samuel Stone. This is my daughter, Helena." The mountain man's gaze shifted to Helena, and she felt pinned by the intensity of those storm cloud eyes. "Vincent Nash," he said with a slight nod. "I trap up in the Rockies, trade furs down here every few months." Helena found her voice, though it came out slightly breathless. "The Rockies, that is quite a journey." "It is a good life," Vincent said simply. "Quiet, honest work." He pulled a broken axe head from the pack slung over his shoulder. The metal had indeed shattered, split clean down the middle. "Can you forge me something that will not fail?" Samuel examined the broken tool, running his fingers over the fracture. "This is poor quality iron. No wonder it broke. I can make you something better, but it will take a few days. I have orders ahead of yours." "I can wait," Vincent said. "Is there a boarding house in town?" "Mrs. Fletcher runs a respectable place 2 streets over," Helena offered. "Clean rooms, good meals." Vincent's eyes returned to her, and something in his expression softened slightly. "Much obliged." He set payment on the workbench, more than enough to cover both the work and materials. "I will return in 3 days." After he left, the shop seemed somehow smaller, as if his presence had expanded to fill every corner and now left a vacuum in its wake. Helena realized she had been holding her breath and released it slowly. "Interesting fellow," her father commented, studying the broken axe head. "Mountain men are a hard breed, have to be living up there alone." "He did not say he lived alone," Helena pointed out, then immediately wondered why she cared. Her father gave her a knowing look but said nothing more. That evening, as Helena pumped the bellows for her father while he worked on a complex commission, she found her thoughts drifting to the mountain man. There had been something in his eyes, a kind of loneliness that echoed her own. She understood what it meant to be different, to keep parts of yourself hidden from the world. "Papa," she said suddenly, "what if I forged the axe head?" Samuel looked up from his work, surprise evident on his face. "Why would you want to do that?" "Because I could make it stronger," she said quietly. "With my gift, I could bend the iron in ways that would make it nearly unbreakable." Her father set down his hammer, his expression thoughtful. "That would certainly be putting your gift to use. But you would have to work at night, when no one could see." "I do not mind," Helena said quickly. The idea had taken root in her mind, and she could not shake it. She wanted to create something worthy of the mountain man, something that would last through years of hard use in the wilderness. 3 nights she worked, after the shop closed and the streets of Independence grew quiet. Her father kept watch while she heated the iron to perfect temperature and began to shape it, not with hammer and tongs alone, but with her hands, her will, her gift. She folded the metal over and over, creating layers of strength, bending and shaping it with a precision no hammer could achieve. The axe head that emerged was a thing of beauty, perfectly balanced, the edge sharp enough to split hairs, the metal so finely worked it seemed to shimmer in the lamplight. When Vincent returned 3 days later, the morning sun had just begun to burn off the night's coolness. Helena was sweeping the front of the shop when he approached, and she found herself smoothing her apron self-consciously, aware that she probably had soot on her face and her braid was coming loose. "Miss Stone," he greeted her, touching his hat. Up close, in better light, she could see the small scars that marked his hands and forearms, testament to his hard life in the mountains. There was a freshness to him despite the dust of travel, as if he carried the clean scent of pine forests and mountain streams. "Mr. Nash," she replied, then called over her shoulder. "Papa, Mr. Nash is here for his axe." Samuel emerged from the back, carrying the finished piece wrapped in oiled cloth. He unveiled it with obvious pride, and Helena held her breath, waiting for Vincent's reaction. The mountain man lifted the axe head carefully, testing its weight, examining the edge and the eye where the handle would fit. His expression remained neutral, but his hands moved over the metal with an expert's knowledge, finding every perfect curve, every precise angle. "This is exceptional work," he said finally, his deep voice holding a note of wonder. "I have never seen better." His storm-cloud eyes lifted to meet Samuel's. "You have a rare talent, sir." Samuel smiled but gestured toward Helena. "My daughter did most of the work. She has a gift for it." Vincent's gaze shifted to Helena, and she felt heat rise in her cheeks that had nothing to do with the forge. "You made this." "I helped," she said, unwilling to claim full credit but unable to lie entirely. "My father taught me everything I know." "Then you are a fine teacher and she is a fine student," Vincent said to Samuel, but his eyes remained on Helena. "This will last me many years. I am grateful." He reached for his payment, but Samuel waved him off. "You already paid enough, more than enough." "For work like this, I should pay double," Vincent insisted. He set more coins on the workbench, then seemed to hesitate. "Miss Stone, would it be forward of me to ask if you might show me where a man could get a decent meal in this town?" Helena's heart jumped unexpectedly. "That would not be forward at all," she said quickly, then glanced at her father. Samuel's eyes twinkled with amusement. "Go on, daughter. The shop can spare you for an hour." The restaurant was modest but clean, and the proprietor's wife served them beef stew with fresh bread that filled the small dining room with its warm, yeasty scent. Helena found herself more nervous than she had expected, uncertain how to make conversation with this taciturn mountain man. But Vincent, despite his rough appearance, proved to be surprisingly easy to talk to once he warmed up. "How long have you been trapping?" she asked, breaking bread between her fingers. "Since I was 18, he replied. "My father died that year, left me his trap lines and his cabin up in the Rockies. I have been there ever since." "That must be lonely." He considered this, chewing slowly. "Lonely and alone are not the same thing. I have my work, the mountains, the changing seasons. Most men are poor company compared to a sunset over the peaks or the first snow of winter." "That sounds beautiful," Helena said wistfully. "I have never been beyond Missouri." "What keeps you here?" Vincent asked, genuine curiosity in his eyes. "My father needs me in the shop." "And where would I go?" "A woman alone does not exactly have the same opportunities as a man." Vincent nodded slowly. "That is true enough, though I suspect you are more capable than most women I have met. That axe head speaks to real skill, not just an assistant's help." Helena felt a flutter of panic. Had she revealed too much in her work? "I have been learning since I was young," she said carefully. "It shows," Vincent said, and left it at that. They talked for nearly 2 hours, far longer than Helena had intended. She learned that Vincent was 28, that he had taught himself to read from his mother's old Bible, that he could track a deer through any terrain, and could predict weather by the behavior of birds and the smell of the wind. In turn, she told him about growing up in the shop, about her mother who had died when Helena was just a girl, about the satisfaction of creating something useful with her own hands. When they finally parted ways, Vincent touched his hat again. "Thank you for your company, Miss Stone. It has been a long while since I had conversation worth remembering." "You are welcome, Mr. Nash," she replied, and watched him walk away with a strange ache in her chest. That night, as she and her father closed up the shop, Samuel said quietly, "He is a good man, I think." "I hardly know him, Papa." "Sometimes you can tell," her father said. "Sometimes you just know." Helena thought about this as she lay in bed that night, unable to sleep. Vincent's face kept appearing in her mind, those storm cloud eyes, the careful way he had examined her work, the surprising gentleness in his deep voice. She told herself it was foolish to think about him. He would leave tomorrow, return to his mountains, and she would likely never see him again. But the next morning, as she opened the shop, she found Vincent sitting on the bench outside. "Mr. Nash," she said, surprise evident in her voice. "I thought you would have left town by now." He stood, and she was struck again by his sheer size, the way his presence seemed to command the space around him. "I was planning to," he admitted. "But I found myself thinking that Independence is a good town, with good people, and perhaps I should spend a few more days here before heading back to the mountains." "I see," Helena said, fighting to keep the smile off her face. "Well, the shop opens at 7 each morning if you need anything else forged." "Maybe I will stop by," he said. "If that would not be an imposition." It would not be an imposition at all. Vincent did stop by every morning for the next week. Sometimes he brought tasks that needed doing, a knife that needed sharpening, a trap that needed repair. Sometimes he simply sat on the bench outside and watched Helena and her father work, his presence somehow both calming and electrifying. In the evenings, he took Helena walking through town, and they talked about everything and nothing, building a friendship that felt both new and ancient, as if they had known each other for years. On the 7th evening, as they sat by the river that ran alongside Independence, watching the sun paint the sky in shades of orange and pink, Vincent said, "I should head back soon. Winter comes early in the mountains, and I need to prepare." Helena's heart sank, though she tried to hide it. "Of course, you have responsibilities." "Helena," he said, and it was the first time he had used her given name. It sounded right in his deep voice, like something precious. "I need to tell you something, even though I probably should not." She turned to look at him, her breath catching at the intensity in his eyes. "I came to Independence expecting to spend a day, maybe two, trading furs and restocking supplies. I did not expect to meet someone who would make me question the life I have built." He paused, his jaw working as if the words were difficult to force out. "You have gotten under my skin, Helena Stone, and I do not know what to do about it." "I feel the same," she whispered, her heart pounding so hard she was sure he could hear it. "But what can we do? Your life is in the mountains and mine is here." Vincent reached out, his large, scarred hand gently cupping her face. His touch was incredibly tender for such a powerful man. "I know, and I would never ask you to give up your life, your father, your shop, but I needed you to know." I needed to say it out loud at least once. Helena leaned into his palm, closing her eyes. "Vincent, I cannot bend iron just because I am skilled. I can do it because I have something in me that other people do not have. A strength that makes no sense, that frightens people when they learn of it. My father has protected me, taught me to hide it, but it is part of who I am." She opened her eyes, expecting to see confusion or skepticism, but Vincent's expression remained steady. "Show me," he said simply. With trembling hands, Helena reached into her pocket and pulled out a thick iron nail. Without heating it, without tools, she bent it between her fingers as easily as if it were made of soft clay, twisting it into a spiral. Vincent watched, his eyes widening slightly, but no fear entered his expression. Instead, something like awe crossed his features. "That is remarkable," he breathed. "You truly are extraordinary. You are not frightened." He shook his head slowly. "Helena, I have seen grizzly bears stand 8 feet tall and survived winters that would kill most men. I have witnessed nature's power in 1,000 forms. Your gift is just another kind of strength, rarer and more beautiful than most." He took the twisted nail from her hand, examining it with wonder. "This is who you are. Why would I fear that?" Tears pricked Helena's eyes. She had never imagined someone would accept her gift so completely, so immediately. "I thought you should know, before you said anything more, before I let myself hope for something impossible." "What if it is not impossible?" Vincent asked, his voice rough with emotion. "What if there is a way?" "What way?" "I cannot leave my father, and you cannot abandon your life in the mountains." "Not permanently, no," Vincent agreed. "But what if I came back? What if I made Independence part of my route, came through every month or two? It would not be a conventional courtship, but we could see where this leads." Hope bloomed in Helena's chest, fragile and fierce. "You would do that, travel all that way regularly." "For you," Vincent's thumb brushed across her cheekbone. "I would travel twice as far." He kissed her then, gentle and reverent, as if she were something precious that might break. Helena melted into him, her hands gripping his broad shoulders, feeling the solid strength of him, the realness. When they finally pulled apart, both breathless, Vincent rested his forehead against hers. "I will come back," he promised. "Every 6 weeks I will come back to Independence." "I will be waiting," Helena whispered. True to his word, Vincent left 2 days later, but not before speaking to Samuel and asking permission to court Helena properly. Her father, who had been watching their growing attachment with approval, granted his blessing readily. "That is a man who knows his own mind," Samuel told Helena after Vincent had ridden out of town. "And a man who sees your worth. Do not let him go easily." "I do not intend to," Helena replied, already counting the days until Vincent's promised return. The weeks that followed were among the longest of Helena's life. She threw herself into work, taking on more complex projects, using her gift to create pieces of exceptional quality. Word began to spread about the blacksmith shop in Independence that produced work superior to anything else in the territory. Orders came in from neighboring towns, and Helena and her father found themselves busier than ever. 6 weeks to the day after Vincent left, Helena was working at the forge when she heard a familiar deep voice say, "I hear this shop does exceptional work." She spun around, and there he was, dusty from travel, his pack loaded with furs but his storm cloud eyes bright with joy at seeing her. Helena did not care that her father was watching or that she was covered in soot. She ran to Vincent, and he caught her, lifting her off her feet as if she weighed nothing, spinning her around before setting her down gently. "You came back," she said, knowing it was obvious but needing to say it anyway. "I said I would," Vincent replied, his hand still on her waist. "Did you doubt me?" "Not for a moment." This pattern continued through the autumn and into winter. Every 6 weeks, like clockwork, Vincent appeared in Independence. Sometimes he stayed for 3 days, sometimes a week, depending on weather and his trapping schedule. Each visit deepened their bond, their conversations growing more intimate, their future together becoming not just possible but inevitable. It was during his 4th visit, in late November as the first snow began to fall, that Vincent arrived with an unusual request. "I need your help with something," he told Helena as they walked through the quiet streets, snow dusting their hair and shoulders. "And I need your gift." Helena looked up at him curiously. "What do you need?" "My cabin," he said. "It is solid, built to last, but there are improvements I want to make. Iron reinforcements for the doors and windows, proper hinges that will not fail in the cold, hooks and fixtures that will make life easier. But more than that, I want them to be beautiful. I want them to be made by you." Understanding dawned in Helena's eyes. "You want me to come to the mountains?" "Only if you want to," Vincent said quickly. "And only if your father can spare you. I would not ask if it were not important, but Helena, I want you to see my home. I want you to understand the life I live there, to see if you could imagine yourself in that place." He stopped walking, turning to face her fully. "Because I am going to ask you to marry me, and before I do, you need to know exactly what that means." Helena's breath caught. "Vincent." "Not yet," he said, his calloused hand coming up to touch her face gently. "Not until you have seen the cabin, lived in the mountains for a time, understood what you would be agreeing to. This needs to be a choice you make with full knowledge, not a romantic dream that turns into a harsh reality." "My father would never allow me to go alone with you," Helena said practically, though her mind was racing. "I know. So I will ask him to come too. It would be a 2-week journey there, 2 weeks back, and perhaps 2 weeks at the cabin. A month and a half total." Could the shop survive that long closed? It was unprecedented. The shop had never been closed for more than a few days at a time, but business was good, they had money saved, and the work could wait. More importantly, Helena knew that this was a crossroads moment. Vincent was offering her a glimpse of their possible future together, and she wanted desperately to take it. "Let me talk to my father," she said. Samuel, to her surprise, agreed more readily than she had expected. "I want to see where my daughter might be living," he said. "And I confess, I would like to see those mountains myself before I am too old to make the journey." They left Independence in early December, traveling with 2 pack mules loaded with supplies and the iron pieces Helena had forged specifically for Vincent's cabin. The journey was difficult, the terrain growing progressively rougher as they climbed into the foothills and then the mountains proper. But Vincent was an expert guide, finding the safest paths, setting up comfortable camps each night, hunting fresh game for their meals. Helena watched him in his element and saw a different side of the man she loved. Here, in the wilderness, his confidence was absolute. He read the land like Helena read metal, understanding its moods and its dangers, working with it rather than against it. He pointed out animal tracks, showed her which plants were edible and which were poison, taught her to listen to the forest's subtle warnings. On the 10th day, as they crested a ridge, Vincent pointed down into a valley below. "There," he said, "that is home." The cabin sat in a clearing beside a swift-moving stream, backed by towering pines and massive rock formations. It was larger than Helena had expected, built from thick logs that had been expertly fitted together. Smoke rose from the chimney, which confused her until Vincent explained. "I pay a young man from the Arapaho tribe to keep the place maintained when I am gone. Keeps the fire going, watches for problems, makes sure animals do not move in. His name is Running Elk, and he is as trustworthy as they come." Running Elk greeted them warmly, his English better than Helena's basic understanding of his language. He was perhaps 19 or 20, with quick eyes and a ready smile. He stayed long enough to help them unload supplies and report on the cabin's condition over Vincent's absence, then departed for his own village a day's ride away, promising to return in a month to check on things. The cabin's interior was simple but comfortable. One large room served as living space and kitchen, with a massive stone fireplace dominating one wall. A smaller room had been built onto the back for sleeping. The furniture was handmade but well crafted, and supplies were neatly organized on shelves Vincent had built into the walls. "It is not much," Vincent said, watching Helena's face anxiously, "but it is warm and dry, and the valley provides everything needed." "It is wonderful," Helena said honestly. The cabin had a solidness to it, a sense of permanence and safety. She could picture herself here, picture a life built in this place. Over the next 2 weeks, Helena and her father worked to install the improvements she had forged. Hinges that would never rust or fail, door reinforcements that would stand against any storm, hooks for hanging herbs and tools and game, a proper crane for the fireplace that would make cooking easier. Each piece had been made with her gift, bent and shaped to perfect specifications, designed to last generations. But more than the metalwork, Helena was learning the rhythms of mountain life. Vincent taught her to check his trap lines, showed her how to read weather in the sky and wind, explained which parts of the forest were safe and which harbored dangers. Samuel joined them on many of these expeditions, and Helena saw her father growing stronger from the mountain air and the daily exercise, his usual shop pallor replaced by healthier color. In the evenings, they sat by the fire, and Vincent told stories of his years in the mountains. Some were adventures, close calls with bears or dangerous weather. Others were quieter observations about the changing seasons, the behavior of animals, the satisfaction of self-sufficiency. Helena shared her own stories, and slowly, father and daughter revealed more about Helena's gift. "I have been thinking," Samuel said one night, staring into the fire, "about why Helena can do what she does. Her mother's grandmother was said to have unusual strength as well, though the family did not speak of it much. Perhaps it runs in the bloodline, appears every few generations." "Does it matter where it comes from?" Vincent asked, his arm around Helena as they sat together on the bench he had built. "It is part of her, and it is extraordinary." "I suppose you are right," Samuel agreed. "I just wanted her to know she is not alone in being different. That others came before, others might come after." Helena leaned into Vincent's warmth, feeling deeply content. Here in this remote place, she did not have to hide any part of herself. She could speak freely about her gift, use it openly when needed. The cabin's isolation, which might have felt lonely before, now felt like freedom. On their last night before the journey back to independence, Vincent asked Helena to walk with him. They bundled in furs against the cold and went out into the moonlit snow, following the stream to a place where it widened into a small pool. The water was partially frozen, and the moon reflected off the ice in brilliant silver. "This is my favorite spot," Vincent said. "I come here to think, to clear my head, to remember why I choose this life." "It is beautiful," Helena breathed, watching her breath mist in the cold air. Vincent turned to face her, and even in the dim light she could see the intensity in his eyes. "Helena Stone, I told you I would not ask until you understood what life here meant. You have seen my cabin, lived in the mountains, experienced the isolation and the challenges. You know now what I am offering." He reached into his coat and pulled out a small leather pouch. From it, he removed a ring. Not gold or silver, but something far more precious to Helena. It was iron, delicately worked into a band inset with small stones he must have collected from the stream. The metalwork was rough compared to what she could do, but it was made with love, and that made it perfect. "I made this myself," Vincent said, "because I wanted to give you something I created with my own hands, the way you create beauty with yours. It is not fancy, but it is honest, like everything between us." He dropped to one knee in the snow, looking up at her with his heart in his eyes. "Helena Stone, will you marry me? Will you share your life between the mountains and independence between my world and yours? I promise to support your work, to honor your gift, to love every part of you for as long as I draw breath. I will travel with you, wait for you, build our life around both our needs. You will never have to choose between me and your father, your shop and this cabin. We will make room for all of it together." Tears froze on Helena's cheeks as she nodded, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. Finally, she managed, "Yes, yes, Vincent, I will marry you." He stood and slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly. Then he kissed her, deep and thorough, warming her despite the cold, making promises with his lips that his words had already spoken. They returned to Independence in late January, and the town welcomed them back with enthusiasm. Word of their engagement spread quickly, and the women of Independence threw themselves into wedding preparations with energy that both amused and touched Helena. The wedding took place in early March, as winter began to loosen its grip, and the first signs of spring appeared. It was a simple ceremony held in the town's small church, with most of Independence in attendance. Samuel walked his daughter down the aisle with pride shining in his eyes, and Vincent stood at the altar looking both nervous and awed, as if he could not quite believe his good fortune. Mrs. Fletcher, the boarding house owner who had become Helena's unofficial wedding planner, had decorated the church with early spring flowers. The ceremony was brief but heartfelt, and when the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Vincent's kiss was gentle and reverent, mindful of their audience but full of promise for their future together. The reception was held at the town hall, with food contributed by seemingly every household in Independence. There was dancing, and Helena laughed as Vincent tried his best to follow the steps, his mountain skills not extending to social dancing. But what he lacked in grace he made up for in enthusiasm, and Helena had never been happier. As the evening wound down, Samuel pulled the newlyweds aside. "I have a wedding gift for you," he said. "I am hiring an assistant for the shop." Helena blinked in surprise. "Papa, we talked about this." "You do not need to do that. I can still work when I am in town." "I know you can," Samuel said, "but you should not have to. You should be free to spend time with your husband, whether here or in the mountains, without worrying about the shop. I am not getting any younger, and it is time I trained someone else anyway. Who knows, maybe I will even slow down a bit, take some time to enjoy life." "I will still help," Helena insisted. "I love the work, Papa. I do not want to give it up entirely." "And you will not have to," Samuel assured her. "But you will have choices now. That is all I want for you, choices." The assistant Samuel hired was a young man named Thomas who had been apprenticed to a blacksmith in Kansas City before that shop closed. He was skilled and eager to learn, and within weeks, he had proven himself capable of handling much of the routine work. This left Samuel free to focus on more complex commissions, and Helena free to work only on the projects that truly interested her. Vincent and Helena settled into a rhythm over the following months. They would spend 6 weeks in Independence, living in the small house behind the shop that had been Samuel's but which he now gifted to them, taking a room in Mrs. Fletcher's boarding house for himself. During this time, Helena worked in the shop, creating pieces that showcased her gift, while Vincent took odd jobs around town, helping with construction projects or hiring out as a hunting guide for wealthy visitors from back east. Then they would spend 6 weeks in the mountains, living in the cabin that was becoming more of a home with each visit. Helena learned to tan hides, preserve meat, identify hundreds of plants and their uses. She became an excellent shot with a rifle and could navigate by the stars. The isolation she had once worried about became precious. These weeks alone with Vincent a time of deep connection and peace. It was during their 3rd stay at the cabin, in late autumn of 1877, that Helena realized she was pregnant. She had suspected for a few weeks, but had waited to be certain before telling Vincent. One morning, as he prepared to check his trap lines, she stopped him. "Vincent, I need to tell you something." He turned, immediately alert to the serious tone in her voice. "What is wrong?" "Nothing is wrong," she said quickly, then smiled. "Everything is right, actually. I am going to have a baby." Vincent's expression went through several rapid changes. Shock, then joy, then worry, then back to joy. He crossed to her in 2 long strides and pulled her into his arms, careful to be gentle. "A baby," he breathed. "Helena, that is wonderful. Are you well? How do you feel?" "I feel fine," she assured him. "A bit sick in the mornings, but otherwise good." "We should go back to Independence," Vincent said immediately. "You should be near a doctor, have women around you who know about these things." Helena had expected this reaction. "We will," she promised. "But not today. I am only a few months along. We have time." They did return to Independence 2 weeks later, and the town once again rallied around them. Mrs. Fletcher, who had delivered 3 children of her own, appointed herself Helena's advisor. The town doctor, an elderly but competent man named Dr. Harrison, examined Helena and pronounced her healthy and strong. "With your build, you should have an easier time than most," he told her. "Though first babies are always unpredictable, make sure you are in town at least a month before the baby is due." Helena's pregnancy progressed smoothly. She continued working in the shop through her 5th month, until her growing belly made it difficult to get close enough to the forge. Her gift, interestingly, seemed to intensify during pregnancy. Iron bent even more easily under her hands, and she could work with larger pieces than ever before. "It is as if the baby is adding to my strength," she told Vincent one evening as they sat together, his hand resting on her rounded stomach. "Perhaps it is," Vincent said. "Or perhaps you are just becoming more comfortable with your gift, using it more fully." Their son was born on a warm day in late May, 1878, after a labor that lasted through the night. Vincent paced outside the bedroom, forbidden entry by Mrs. Fletcher and the other women who had gathered to help. When he finally heard the baby's cry, he nearly broke down the door getting inside. Helena lay exhausted but radiant in the bed, holding a tiny bundle. "Meet your son," she said softly. The baby was red-faced and squalling, with a shocking amount of dark hair and lungs that proclaimed his arrival to the entire neighborhood. Vincent took him with shaking hands, his large, scarred fingers incredibly gentle as they supported the small head. "He is perfect," Vincent whispered, tears streaming down his face unashamedly. What should we name him? They had discussed names but never settled on one. Now, looking at her husband holding their son with such tenderness, Helena said, "What about Nathaniel? Nathaniel Stone Nash." "Nathaniel," Vincent repeated, testing the name. The baby stopped crying at the sound of his father's deep voice, his unfocused eyes seeming to search for the source. "Yes. Nathaniel is perfect." The first months of Nathaniel's life were an adjustment for everyone. Helena and Vincent remained in independence, wanting to be near Dr. Harrison and the support network of women who helped with the baby. Vincent adapted to town life with surprising ease, though Helena sometimes caught him staring at the western horizon with longing in his eyes. "We will go back to the mountains," she promised him one night as they lay in bed, Nathaniel sleeping in his cradle beside them. "Once he is a bit older, once I feel confident managing him there." "There is no rush," Vincent assured her, but she could hear the homesickness in his voice. When Nathaniel was 4 months old, healthy and thriving, they made the journey to the cabin. It was slower going with a baby, requiring more frequent stops and more supplies, but they managed. Running Elk, who had continued to maintain the cabin in their absence, was fascinated by the baby and brought gifts from his tribe: a cradle board, soft furs for warmth, a small carved toy. "He will grow strong in the mountains," Running Elk said approvingly. Life with a baby in the cabin was challenging but rewarding. Nathaniel seemed to thrive in the mountain air, his cheeks growing rosy, his eyes bright and alert. Helena learned to work with one hand while holding her son, to sleep lightly and wake at his smallest sound, to find moments of peace in the chaotic new reality of motherhood. Vincent was a devoted father, singing to Nathaniel in his deep voice, carrying him in a sling against his broad chest as he did light work around the cabin. Helena's heart overflowed watching them together, her powerful mountain man reduced to tenderness by their tiny son. They established a new rhythm over the following years. Longer stays in independence during the harsh winter months, when the cabin would be too difficult to manage with a young child. Summers and early autumns in the mountains, where Nathaniel learned to walk on the forest floor and speak his first words to the sound of the stream. The shop continued to thrive. Thomas proved to be an excellent blacksmith in his own right, and with 3 skilled workers now available, they took on larger projects. Word of Helena's exceptional work had spread far beyond Missouri, and they received commissions from as far away as California and Texas. On one such commission, when Nathaniel was 3 years old, a wealthy rancher from Colorado traveled to Independence specifically to meet Helena. He wanted iron gates for his property, something spectacular that would announce the importance of his holdings. Helena designed gates that were both functional and beautiful, using her gift to create metalwork that seemed to flow like water frozen in time. The rancher was so impressed when he saw them that he paid double the agreed price and sent 5 more customers Helena's way. "You are becoming famous," Vincent teased her, though pride shone in his eyes. "I am becoming busy," Helena corrected, but she could not deny the satisfaction the work brought her. When Nathaniel was 4, Helena discovered she was pregnant again. This pregnancy was different from the first. She was more tired, more emotional, and her gift seemed to wane rather than strengthen. She worried that something was wrong, but Dr. Harrison assured her that every pregnancy was unique. "You are healthy, the baby is healthy," he told her. That is what matters. Their daughter was born in early spring of 1882, arriving more quickly than Nathaniel had, as if she was impatient to meet the world. She was smaller than her brother had been, with Vincent's storm cloud eyes and Helena's dark hair, and she emerged into the world without crying, simply looking around with intense curiosity. "She is going to be trouble," Mrs. Fletcher predicted with a laugh. "I know that look. This one will keep you on your toes." They named her Helena Stone Nash, and Mrs. Fletcher's prediction proved accurate. Where Nathaniel had been a calm baby, content to observe the world, Sarah demanded interaction, attention, constant engagement. She began talking earlier than Nathaniel had, walking earlier, climbing everything she could reach. "She has your determination," Vincent told Helena one afternoon, catching Sarah before she could pull a hot pot off the stove. "And possibly your strength. Look at how she grips." It was true that Sarah's grip was remarkably strong for such a small child. As she grew older, other signs appeared. At 2 years old, she bent a pewter spoon while trying to eat, crushing it in her small fist. At 3, she picked up a hammer that should have been too heavy for her and carried it across the shop. "She has your gift," Vincent said with certainty. Helena watched her daughter with mixed emotions. She was glad Sarah would not be alone in her abilities, would not have to wonder why she was different. But she also knew the challenges that came with such strength, the need for secrecy and control. "We will teach her," Vincent said, reading Helena's concerns in her face. "We will raise her to understand her gift, to use it wisely. And she will have you as an example, someone who has navigated these waters successfully." As the children grew, Helena began teaching them both about metalwork. Nathaniel showed interest but not exceptional aptitude. He preferred working with wood, and Vincent began teaching him carving and carpentry. Sarah, however, was drawn to the forge with intense fascination. By age 5, she was bending metal with her bare hands, her gift even stronger than Helena's had been at the same age. "You have to be careful," Helena told her daughter seriously. "Not everyone will understand what you can do. Some people might be frightened." "Why?" Sarah asked with the straightforward logic of childhood. "It is just what I can do. Papa can lift heavy things because he is strong." "You can bend metal because you have a gift. I can bend metal too." "Why is that scary?" "Because it is different," Helena explained. "And people sometimes fear what they do not understand." Sarah considered this with her too serious expression. "Then I will only show people who understand." It was a simple solution, and it mostly worked. In independence, Sarah was careful, using her gift only in the shop with family present. In the mountains, she was free, bending iron to create art pieces that amazed even Helena, helping with repairs and improvements to the cabin that should have been impossible for a child her age. The years passed in a rhythm of seasons and cycles. Independence to the mountains and back again. The children growing taller and more capable, the shop's reputation spreading further. Samuel aged gracefully, eventually retiring from active work, but still spending most days in the shop, advising and teaching Thomas, telling stories to his grandchildren. When Nathaniel was 12 and Sarah 9, Vincent proposed a change to their routine. "I want to take Nathaniel into the mountains for a full season," he said. "Just him and me. Teach him the trap lines, the survival skills, everything I know. He is old enough now, and I think he needs this." Helena understood immediately. Nathaniel had been showing signs of restlessness, caught between childhood and manhood, unsure of his place. Time alone with his father, learning the skills that had defined Vincent's life, would help him find his footing. "When would you go?" she asked. "Late spring, back before winter." 6 months, maybe 7. It was the longest they would have been apart since marrying, but Helena recognized the necessity. "Then you should go." The morning they left, Helena held Nathaniel tight. Her son was nearly as tall as she was now, his voice deepening, his shoulders beginning to show the breadth he would inherit from his father. "Learn everything your father teaches you," she told him, "and come back safe." "I will, Ma," Nathaniel promised. Those months were difficult for Helena. She missed Vincent with an ache that surprised her in its intensity. She had grown so accustomed to his presence, his steady strength, the way he filled a room just by being in it. The house felt empty without him, too quiet except for Sarah's constant chatter. She threw herself into work, taking on complex commissions that required all her skill and focus. Sarah worked beside her when allowed, and they grew closer during this time, mother and daughter united in their shared gift. Letters arrived occasionally, brought by running elk who made the journey every few weeks. Vincent's writing was simple but heartfelt, describing Nathaniel's progress, the beauty of the mountains in summer, how much he missed her. Helena treasured each letter, reading them until the paper grew soft. When Vincent and Nathaniel finally returned in late autumn, both were deeply tanned, leaner, harder. Nathaniel moved with new confidence, and there was a maturity in his eyes that had not been there before. But it was Vincent that Helena could not stop staring at. 6 months apart had made her forget just how much space he took up, how his presence affected her. That night, after the children were in bed and the initial excitement had settled, Vincent pulled Helena into his arms. "I missed you," he said simply, his voice rough with emotion. "Every day, every moment. The cabin felt wrong without you." "I missed you too," Helena whispered against his chest, breathing in the scent of him, pine and leather and something uniquely Vincent. "Do not leave me for that long again." "Never," he promised, and kissed her with 6 months of longing behind it. The years continued their march forward. Nathaniel, at 16, announced his intention to establish his own trap lines in a valley 2 days from Vincent's cabin. It was time. Helena knew for him to build his own life, but that did not make it easier to watch him go. Vincent traveled with him, helped him build his cabin, ensured he was properly supplied and prepared. Sarah, at 13, was already Helena's equal in metalwork. Together they created pieces that drew attention from across the country. A senator from Washington commissioned gates for his estate. A railroad magnate wanted a decorative facade for his private train car. Each project pushed them to new heights of creativity and skill. It was during one such project that tragedy struck. Samuel, now in his 70s, suffered a heart attack while in the shop. He collapsed beside the forge he had worked at for 50 years, and though Dr. Harrison came immediately, there was nothing to be done. Samuel Stone died in Helena's arms, Thomas holding his hand, his last words a whisper of pride in his daughter's accomplishments. The loss devastated Helena. Her father had been her teacher, her protector, her constant support throughout her life. The shop felt emptier without his presence, even though he had not actively worked in years. Vincent held her through the grief, his strength a rock she clung to when everything else felt unstable. They buried Samuel in Independence's cemetery, and the entire town attended the funeral. Vincent delivered a eulogy, his deep voice carrying across the gathered mourners, speaking of Samuel's skill, his kindness, his legacy that lived on in his daughter and granddaughter. In the weeks after, Helena found herself unable to work. The forge that had always been a source of joy now reminded her only of her father. It was Sarah who finally broke through her grief. "Grandfather would not want you to stop," her daughter said one morning, taking Helena's hand and leading her into the shop. "He would want you to create, to teach, to continue what he started. That is how we honor him, not by stopping but by continuing." Sarah was right, of course. Helena returned to work slowly and found that the act of creation was healing. Each piece she made carried her father's teachings, his philosophy, his love. The shop became a memorial in action, a living tribute to Samuel Stone. Time moved on, as it always does. Nathaniel married a young woman from running Elk's tribe, a match that made both families happy. They built a life in his mountain valley, and Helena and Vincent became grandparents to 3 children who ran wild through the forests with the fearlessness of their heritage. Sarah, at 18, showed no interest in marriage despite several interested suitors in independence. "I have the shop, I have my work," she told her mother. "That is enough for now." Helena understood. She had been the same at that age, finding more satisfaction in creation than in social expectations. She did not push, trusting Sarah to find her own path in her own time. When Vincent was 50 and Helena 42, they made a decision. Thomas had been running the shop for years with Sarah's help when she was in town. The business was stable, profitable, well regarded. It did not need Helena the way it once had. "I want to spend more time in the mountains," Helena told Vincent one evening. "Not just a few months at a time. I want to make the cabin our primary home, come to independence only when we need to or want to, not because we must." Vincent's face showed his surprise and joy. "Are you certain? You have built so much here." "And it will continue without me," Helena said. "Thomas and Sarah can handle the shop. They do not need me hovering. I want time with you, Vincent. I want mornings watching the sunrise over the peaks. I want evenings by our fire. I want to see the seasons change in the valley. We have spent so many years divided between 2 worlds. I am ready to choose the one that has you in it all the time." They made the move in spring, bringing with them years of accumulated belongings, improvements for the cabin, supplies for a longer stay. Sarah chose to remain in independence, living in the house behind the shop, continuing the work her mother and grandfather had started. She promised to visit, and Helena knew she would when the work allowed. Life in the mountains full-time was different from their previous visits. There was a permanence to it now, a sense of having finally come home. Helena continued to work metal, but for pleasure rather than commission. She created art pieces, iron sculptures of birds and deer, decorative fixtures for the cabin, gifts for Nathaniel's family, and for running Elk's tribe. Vincent, freed from the need to travel constantly for trade, focused on improving their land. He built additions to the cabin, created a proper workshop for Helena, carved furniture that made their home more comfortable. They worked side by side, partners in the truest sense, building a life that reflected both their strengths. On their 20th anniversary, Vincent surprised Helena by leading her to the pool where he had proposed. It was summer, and the water flowed clear and cold over smooth stones. On a boulder beside the pool sat a metal sculpture, a mountain man and a woman standing together, his arm around her shoulders, her head against his chest. The detail was extraordinary, despite being worked in iron, and Helena recognized Vincent's handiwork immediately. "You made this?" she asked, awed. "With help from Sarah on the technical parts," he admitted. "But the design is mine. It is us, Helena, how we have stood together through everything." Helena traced the figures with her fingers, feeling the love that had gone into every line. "It is beautiful, perfect." "Like you," Vincent said, pulling her close. "Like our life together. I know I am not a man of fancy words, but I need you to know, Helena Stone Nash, that these 20 years with you have been the greatest gift of my life. You took a lonely mountain man and showed him what love could be. You gave me children, built homes with me both here and in town, supported my dreams while pursuing your own. You are the strongest person I have ever known in every possible way." Helena leaned into his embrace, this man who had seen all of her, every gift and flaw, and loved her completely. "You told me once, that first day we met properly, that most men are poor company compared to a sunset over the peaks. Do I compare favorably?" Vincent laughed, his chest rumbling against her back. You are the sunrise and the sunset both, Helena. You are the mountains, the forest, the stream. You are everything that makes this life worth living." They stood together as the light faded and stars began to emerge, two people who had found in each other what they had not even known they were searching for. Behind them, the iron sculpture stood sentinel, a permanent reminder of love that had bent the courses of two lives into one shared path. Sarah visited the next summer, bringing news from Independence and new techniques she had developed for metalworking. She spent a month at the cabin, working alongside her mother as they had when Sarah was young, talking late into the evenings about art and craft and the responsibilities that came with their gift. "There is a man in town," Sarah mentioned casually one evening. "A carpenter, recently arrived from St. Louis. He does beautiful work and he is kind and he makes me laugh." Helena smiled, remembering her own dawning awareness of Vincent years before. "Tell me about him." Sarah did, her words painting a picture of a good man who saw past her unusual strength to the person beneath. His name was Michael, and from Sarah's descriptions, Helena suspected her daughter had already made her choice, even if she had not admitted it to herself yet. "Bring him to visit," Helena suggested. "Let us meet this man who has caught your attention." Sarah did, the following spring. Michael was indeed skilled and kind, and he watched Sarah work metal with the same awed respect Vincent had always shown Helena. He asked intelligent questions, admired without trying to diminish, supported without overwhelming. Vincent gave his approval with a nod, and Helena hugged her daughter, whispering, "He is a good one. If you love him, do not let him go." Sarah married Michael in a small ceremony in Independence, with the whole family traveling from the mountains to attend. Helena watched her daughter promise her life to this good man, and remembered her own wedding, the same church, the same sense of rightness and hope and joy. The years that followed were full. Nathaniel's children grew and had children of their own. Sarah and Michael had two daughters and a son, all of whom showed varying degrees of the gift that ran through their mother's bloodline. The shop in Independence thrived under Sarah and Michael's joint leadership, his woodwork complementing her metalwork, creating pieces that were sought after across the nation. Helena and Vincent grew older together, their hair graying, their movements slower but no less certain. The cabin that had once been a rough mountain shelter had transformed into a true home, filled with decades of memories and love. Running Elk, now a grandfather himself, still visited regularly, bringing news from the changing world beyond the mountains. On Helena's 60th birthday, the entire family gathered at the cabin. 3 generations filled the space to bursting, with children running through the forest, adults talking and laughing, food cooking over the fire. Helena stood on the porch, watching the chaos with deep contentment when Vincent appeared at her side. His hair was silver now, his face deeply lined, but his storm cloud eyes still held the same intensity they had when he first walked into her father's shop more than 30 years before. His shoulders were still broad, his arms still strong from years of mountain living, though age had finally begun to soften the hard edges of his body. "What are you thinking?" he asked, his voice still deep, though rougher with age. "I am thinking about iron," Helena said, leaning against him. "About how it must be heated and hammered and shaped to become something useful. About how pressure and force and time transform it from ore into tools, into art, into things that last." "Profound thoughts for a birthday," Vincent teased gently. "We have been heated and hammered and shaped too," Helena continued. "By time, by challenges, by love. We have been transformed into something stronger than we were alone. You said once that I could never bend your heart away. Do you remember?" Vincent frowned slightly. "I do not think I said those exact words." "You did not," Helena admitted with a smile. "But you thought them. I could see it in your eyes that first day. This mountain man, so certain in his solitary life, convinced that nothing could change his path. But I did bend your heart, Vincent Nash. I bent it toward me, toward us, toward this life we have built." "You did," Vincent agreed, pulling her closer. "Though bend is too gentle a word. You took my heart and reshaped it completely, created something new from what I thought was already finished. And I would not change a single moment of it." They stood together, watching their family, their legacy, the life they had created through love and determination, and the simple choice to trust each other. Inside the cabin, Sarah was teaching her daughters to sense the structure of metal, explaining the gift that ran through their blood. In the clearing, Nathaniel's grandchildren played games their grandfather had taught them, mountain skills passed down through generations. Michael and Thomas sat by the fire, discussing their next joint project, two craftsmen who had married into this unusual family and accepted its uniqueness without reservation. "We should tell them stories," Vincent said suddenly, "about how we met, how we built this life. So they know where they come from." Helena squeezed his hand. "Yes, let us tell them stories." They gathered everyone as the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink that reminded Helena of that first sunset she had watched with Vincent by the river in Independence. 3 generations settled in, the youngest children in their parents' laps, everyone turning to face Helena and Vincent with expectant faces. "Your grandmother and I met in a blacksmith shop," Vincent began, his deep voice capturing everyone's attention. "I needed an axe head, and I expected to collect it and leave. But then I saw Helena bend metal with her bare hands, and I knew my life was about to change." Helena took up the story, describing her first impression of the giant mountain man who had filled her father's doorway. How he had not flinched when she revealed her gift. How he had proposed by a moonlit pool with a ring he made himself. Vincent added his perspective, the details she could not have known, how he had lain awake that first night in Mrs. Fletcher's boarding house, unable to stop thinking about the blacksmith's daughter who could shape iron with just her hands. They talked for hours, their voices weaving together as naturally as their lives had woven together, painting pictures of the past for the generations who would carry those stories into the future. They spoke of challenges overcome, of the balance they had found between two very different worlds, of love that had grown deeper with every passing year. As the night grew late and the fire burned low, the youngest children fell asleep where they sat, and the adults began carrying them to beds and pallets throughout the cabin. Helena and Vincent remained on the porch, alone again as they had been at the start of the evening. "We have had a good life," Vincent said quietly, his arm around her shoulders. "The best life," Helena agreed, resting her head against his chest, listening to his heart beat steady and strong. "And it is not over yet. We still have time." "We do," Vincent said. "But whenever that time ends, Helena, I want you to know that you made every moment worth living. You bent my heart, yes, but in doing so, you made it capable of more love than I ever imagined possible." Helena lifted her face to kiss him, tasting love and years and promises kept. Around them, the mountains stood eternal, witness to vows spoken and honored, to a life built not despite differences but because of them, to the truth that the strongest things in life are those forged with heat and pressure and time. Years continued to pass, each one adding more stories to tell, more memories to treasure. Vincent's strength finally began to fail in his 70s, his steps slower, his breathing more labored after exertion. But his mind remained sharp, his love unchanged, his presence still the center of Helena's world. On a clear autumn day, when the aspens had turned gold and the air carried the first hint of winter, Vincent suffered a stroke while checking his trap lines. He managed to make it back to the cabin, where Helena found him collapsed by the door. She dragged him inside with her gift-given strength, held him while sending running Elk's grandson racing to fetch Sarah and Nathan, prayed to every god she could name that this was not the end. Vincent recovered somewhat, but the stroke had stolen much of his mobility and speech. Helena cared for him with fierce devotion, refusing to let him give up, pushing him through exercises the doctor recommended, talking to him even when he could not answer. Slowly, painfully, Vincent regained some of what he had lost. His speech remained slurred and his left side weak, but he could walk with assistance and make himself understood. "I am sorry," he told Helena one evening, the words difficult but clear enough. "You should not have to do this." "Do what?" Helena asked, helping him into bed. "Care for the man I love. Vincent Nash, you have spent 40 years caring for me in 1,000 ways. Let me do this for you." "Getting old," Vincent muttered, frustration evident in his voice. "We both are," Helena said gently. "That is what happens when you live a long, full life. We face it together, like we have faced everything else." They had 5 more years together after Vincent's stroke. Difficult years in some ways, as his health continued to decline, and Helena faced the reality that her strong mountain man would not be with her forever. But they were also beautiful years, stripped of everything unnecessary, reduced to the essential truth of 2 people who loved each other completely. Vincent died peacefully in his sleep one winter night, with Helena beside him as she had been for 45 years. She woke to find him still and cold, his face peaceful, finally free of the pain and frustration that had marked his last years. She held him and cried, her tears falling on the silver hair she had loved to run her fingers through, mourning the loss of her partner, her love, her heart. They buried Vincent on a hillside overlooking the valley, with a view of the mountains he had loved his entire life. Helena forged his marker herself, iron worked into a design of strength and permanence, inscribed with simple words: Vincent Nash, mountain man, beloved husband, father, grandfather, his heart was bent by love. The cabin felt impossibly empty without him. Helena wandered through rooms that echoed with memories, seeing Vincent everywhere, unable to escape the absence that filled every corner. Sarah wanted her to return to independence, to live out her remaining years in town where family could watch over her. But Helena refused. "This is my home," she told her daughter firmly. "Your father and I built this life here. I will not abandon it now." So Helena remained in the mountains, with running Elk's family checking on her regularly and Nathan visiting from his nearby valley as often as he could. She continued to work metal, creating pieces that expressed her grief and her love, her memories transformed into physical form. Her gift remained strong despite her 70 years, and her hands still bent iron as easily as they had when she was 20. She lived another 10 years after Vincent's death, 10 years of gradual decline but continued purpose. She taught her great-grandchildren the secrets of metalworking, passed on the stories of her life with Vincent, ensured that the legacy they had built together would continue. On quiet evenings, she sat on the porch and spoke to Vincent as if he were still beside her, telling him about their growing family, about the world that kept changing, about how much she missed him and how grateful she was for the years they had shared. Helena Stone Nash died on a spring morning, 80 years old, sitting in the chair Vincent had carved for her, a piece of iron bent into the shape of a bird clutched in her hands. Sarah found her, having come to visit, and recognized immediately that her mother had finally gone to join her father. There was a smile on Helena's face, a look of peace and joy, as if she had seen something wonderful in those final moments. They buried her beside Vincent, under the same sky they had loved, with a marker that matched his. The family gathered, now 4 generations strong, all of them carrying some piece of the legacy Helena and Vincent had created. The gift ran through several bloodlines now, carefully taught and responsibly used, no longer a secret to hide but a strength to honor. Sarah, now 55 and silver-haired herself, stood at her parents' graves and told stories to her grandchildren. Stories of a blacksmith's daughter who could bend iron and a mountain man who said she could never bend his heart away, but who had been wrong, beautifully and completely wrong. Stories of love that transformed 2 separate lives into one shared journey, of gifts accepted and celebrated, of building a family on foundations of trust and respect and unwavering devotion. They were extraordinary, Sarah told the children gathered around her. Not just because of what they could do, but because of who they chose to be. They built a life that honored both their strengths, that made room for differences, that grew deeper and richer with every year. That is their true legacy. Not the gift, not the metalwork, but the love. The kind of love that bends hearts, reshapes lives, and creates something stronger than either person could build alone. The wind blew through the valley, rustling the trees Vincent had known like old friends, carrying the scent of the flowers Helena had planted around the cabin. In the ironworks shop in Independence, Michael and his apprentices continued the tradition Samuel Stone had started a century before, creating pieces that would last for generations. In a dozen cabins scattered through the mountains and across Missouri, children carried the blood and the gifts of 2 extraordinary people who had found each other against all odds. The story of Helena Stone and Vincent Nash became part of family legend, told and retold, embellished and celebrated. But at its core, the story remained simple. 2 people who had been brave enough to trust each other, wise enough to build a life that honored both their needs, and blessed enough to grow old together, their love bending and shaping everything it touched, creating beauty that would endure long after they were gone. The mountains stood eternal, the iron endured, and the legacy of their love continued, passed down through generations. A testament to the truth that the strongest things in life are not those that resist change, but those that bend, adapt, and transform, creating something new and beautiful from the raw materials of 2 separate lives joined into one.